Hi everyone, I'm Courtney McGrath from the Ability Co-op. Here with me today is Declan Traynor, the Director of the Disability Service, and Jack Kavanagh, who is one of the leaders for the Printing House Square Leaders Project. As the Disability Service transitions to Printing House Square, there will be rooms named after disabled Trinity graduates that have shown great examples of leadership and activism.
Hi Jack. I just wanted to start off with a nice easy one about telling us about your journey to Trinity and through Trinity, if you could describe that to us.
Absolutely. So first of all, I'm absolutely delighted to be a part of this initiative and really honored that you consider me for it. So I suppose my journey is quite an interesting one in that I had it before and an after while I was in Trinity. And in both instances, I had an involvement with the disability section. And coming into college, I was studying pharmacy, very much health focused, and out there started to get involved in college life quite early on. And I carried with me a small part of who I was is the fact that I'm dyslexic. And that was something that I had battled with through primary and secondary school, and had differing levels of support at different times. And that really leveled the playing field for me, particularly when I came into Trinity, because it gave me simple supports that were really effective and non-invasive, I suppose. And so at the beginning of that year, the first year, I remember attending a talk and then just turning up at the Disability Services office. And for me that year, it was relatively light touch, and I needed to get registered. I got access to additional time in exams and a special venue as well, with others who had additional time. And all of those things really just served to give me a fair chance in my first year in college. And I suppose in that year as well, I can remember going in and not wanting everyone to know. And there was that sense of apprehension about turning up at the offices and so on. But it was such a seamless and easy process, and very much the disability service was there in the background to support me, importantly, if or when I needed it. And they weren't in my face by any means. So that was a really positive experience in my first year in college. And particularly at exam time, having a venue where others were there with extra time it very much normalized it for me, because I was there with my peers, all who were getting an opportunity to fairly express their abilities in a college context. So that was my experience in the first year. And as many do, I went away and I worked a summer job at the end of my first year, and I worked down the west of Ireland as a windsurfing and surfing instructor and as a lifeguard. And at the end of that summer, I went away on holidays, and on my first day of a holiday, I had an accident on the beach where I ran down a beach, dived into the water over a wave, and my head collided with a sandbank. And in that moment, I broke my neck. And so life changed pretty dramatically for me in that moment. And the repercussions, I suppose, or the realities that I, in this blink of an eye, was then facing was that I was paralyzed at the time from the neck down. And that threw me into a whole different context in my life. And I did intensive care in Portugal where I had the accident. I was air ambulanced home and spent more time in intensive care and then high dependency. And then I moved to rehab. And in rehab, I started to come to terms with and learn how to navigate the world with this new set of circumstances. And both I and my family recognized that one of the most important things to happen was for me to go back into the college environment. And that seemed an awful long way away when at the time I was coming off a ventilator, learning how to breathe unaided, literally like a child again. I needed assistance with everything. And probably about 15 minutes after my family and I had that first conversation about going back to the college environment, all the benefits that would come with that, and about continuing my development in life, that this was a hurdle that I had to overcome rather than the end. And about 15 minutes after we decided that it was important for me to go back to college, my tutor at the time actually walked in to the rehab ward, John Quigley from the pharmacy department. And it was kind of a case of you actually couldn't make this up. And what was amazing was, like in Portugal, when I had the accident, I had some of my best friends from college flew out. I was with friends, and then friends from pharmacy that I was due to live with the next year flew out to me as well. And I said to them, will you get in touch with the department and tell them that I've had an accident, but I'll be back. I might be a few weeks late getting back in. And I possibly didn't understand the gravity of my situation at that time, whilst I had a good handle on it. But John was very much a partner in making my move back to college at least possible, and being a touchstone as I went through rehab. Now, what I didn't know was that there was a whole host of people working away in the background, including Declan Trainer, Declan Riley, Helen Sheridan, and a host of others involved as well. And through the next year, I didn't make it back that year, but through the next year, we gradually started to challenge, I suppose, some of the status quo. We started to understand how we could make this possible. We started to recognize behind the scenes that I had just as much of a right to be in the college and to pursue my training as a health professional and all of these various things. And ultimately that I too had just as much of a right to be living on campus and to avail of that, albeit with the support of a personal assistant that I needed at the time. And there was some pretty massive hurdles that were overcome, and all of that was done with the support of the disability service. And as importantly, the thing that I experienced in my first year of college stayed true in that experience after I had the spinal cord injury, in that they were there to support me if and when I needed the support, and they worked away in the background. Now, I had no idea how much work was going on in the background, and that was probably a good thing at the time. But these people were advocating for me at a time when I didn't understand just how much I needed that advocacy. And I think we, through the years of me going back to college and so on, paved the way for others to do very similar things as well, which was, I suppose, it is the blessing and the curse of being an early adopter in one area and of having to carve a path. But it, in many ways, is very humbling to know that because you went through it and were willing to challenge and to advocate in the way that I did, and that many within the college did on my behalf, that now that process is far more straightforward for others. And so I was then supported over the next number of years by the disability service in a variety of ways. I needed personal assistance on campus to assist me a lot in the early days, through my day in college and overnight, getting in and out of bed, all of it. And with that support, it gradually was lessened over the years, because essentially I was facilitated or empowered to stretch myself repeatedly. And each year, as I went through my degree, I was given the support that I needed. We're here if and when you need us. How do we have a safety net here just in case? And then it was very much a case of, like, go and do your thing, Jack. Like, you're here to have a college experience, and we're here to facilitate that this is a level playing field for you in as many ways as possible. And that, again, at exam time, meant I got some extra time as I learned to use voice recognition software in the early days, and then relearned how to type. I had an assistant taking notes for me in the early days, and then I figured out ways to do that on my own. I was facilitated in terms of practical exams, where I would describe to others how to carry out the procedures when I couldn't do it myself. And so they were very much solutions oriented. And at no point was I given unfair advantage, but very much, as I've said numerous times now, they leveled the playing field. And I think what was really touching was that, like, through the years that I was in Trinity and had interaction with the disability service, I saw such a dramatic change in the way that they operated and how they permeated through the college environment. And they essentially were disruptors in a time that the college possibly didn't know that it needed to be disrupted. And that is really important. And it's really important that the students feel that there's people within the organization or the college that are advocating on their behalf and are leading the charge, and that are hearing what they are saying and the challenges that they're facing. But it's also important that the students have a place to go when they face the setbacks and the struggles that are inevitable for each one of us, and that they'll be heard, they'll be supported, and that there's a place for them to come and really be seen for who they are. And they were all things that I experienced, and it stirs up quite a lot of emotion in me, because I, by talking about it, can see on how many levels they helped me to rise quietly. And yeah, it's a really good experience.
I know it was great to hear about your journey from Trinity as a student with dyslexia and then becoming a wheelchair user. This question is a bit further from Trinity, but like a few weeks ago, I watched your documentary, the Breaking Boundaries documentary, with yourself and your friends, and you travelled to the west coast of America. Do you have any other places that you're eager to visit post-COVID, or are there any places that you're discouraged to visit due to accessibility issues?
So breaking boundaries was a big moment. And in many ways, it bookmarked a period of my life when, I had, with the support of so many people, systematically challenged everything that I was told I couldn't do. Like I can remember the meeting when the consultant comes in and says the list of you can't and you will never, and this is all the support you'll need, and so on. And I took it as a challenge. And in those early years, we systematically challenged all of those things. And I did that in Trinity, and then outside of Trinity, when I suppose breaking boundaries really came about when I saw that all of my friends in college were traveling, and I said, well, why would it be that I wouldn't travel as well? And with a group of good friends, it kind of showed me that with the right support and environment, we help everybody. And so that's one of my central tenets when we talk about making the world more diverse and inclusive and so on. Environment is everything. And I might seem like I'm going off track on your question, but this comes back full circle, because environment is everything. And the only thing that enables or disables any individual is the environment in which they exist. And by environment, I mean the physical environment, the social environment, the legal environment, the cultural environment, all of these things. And for me, all of those things became more and more apparent as I went through my journey of disability. And they're the things that disable people. But they're also the things that can completely enable people. And that's the experience that I had in college, was that those barriers got broken down, or the boundaries got broken. And that was the experience with my travel as well, is that I was in a social environment with really good friends, good people that completely empowered me. And that enabled us to do all sorts of mad things in environments that otherwise would have been inaccessible to me. So nobody expects a guy with 15% muscle function to jump out of a plane, or to go whitewater rafting, or to road trip around America, and to do all of the things that everybody else their age gets up to, and the mischief and the stuff that definitely doesn't end up on camera, which is probably the most important stuff. And so having that experience was huge for me. And sometimes you go away for a change of context, and it puts things in perspective. It almost zooms the lens out and gives you a better sense of perspective, so that you can be more resilient and aware and open in your more local environment. And when I came back from that trip in the States that time and back to Ireland, I saw much more possibility and potential than I otherwise had. And I've done quite a bit of travel since then. And I had plans actually at the beginning that got sidetracked by COVID. I was due to cycle the Camino de Santiago, which was a big ambition. It definitely is not accessible in any way, shape, or form. And it was very much a stretch goal. And the global pandemic put a halt on that. And it actually showed me that sometimes you actually don't need to go too far to have an adventure, and that there's so much to explore close to home. And that's actually been a really good lesson for me as well, because if I'm honest, traveling in my situation as a wheelchair user, whilst it's eye-opening and so on, and I'd love to see new cultures and places, depending on the place that you go and the group that you're with, it can either be incredibly enabling or incredibly disabling. And it just highlights again and again that environmental piece, social, legal, physical, and like all those environmental cues are so important. So I hope that is, in a roundabout way, an answer to your question.
Yeah, that definitely is an answer to the question. Thank you. So my other question is, in your TED Talk in 2014, you discuss how it is not about the event, but it's about the response. How do you try to remain positive and optimistic after your accident?
So it is always about the response. And that sounds very easy, doesn't it? But it's not that easy. And I suppose in many ways it comes down to the choices we make. And it's recognizing actually that we have choice in how we show up, in how we think about events, in how, on the perspective that we take, on how we engage with people, how we either see barriers or opportunities, and all of these kind of things. And that sounds all grand, but when you face these things in the moment, they can be quite challenging. And it's just to recognize that you don't have to get it right all the time. This is not about stupid levels of positivity that are just delusional and end up with you beating yourself up more than ever. This is about what I would call optimistic realism, which is where you actually grapple with reality. You say, this circumstance that I'm facing is not ideal. This is maybe not what I would have chosen. And you face up to the realities of your life, but you become optimistic about them at that point, because reality is as it is. You can't argue with reality. But you can decide what you do with it. And that's what I repeatedly did, was that I tried to take the optimistic slant on it. And I tried to find people and ways of being enabled rather than disempowered or disabled. And the amazing thing about this is, as I said, you don't have to get it right all the time. All you need to do is get it right 51% of the time, and you're moving in the right direction. And so that gives you permission to fail and fall and have setbacks and step backs and weeks and months where shit just hits the fan and things don't go well and you don't feel good about yourself or in yourself and so on. And then the tide starts to turn again and you start taking more empowering actions and making some of the moves and meeting some of the people and being open to some of the possibilities that will allow you to move forward in the right direction. And so existing sort of in the 51% of being optimistic is really important. And so when we say it's not just about the event, it's about the response. It's about dealing and looking at the event and saying, okay, this isn't great, to be honest. Like, I definitely didn't want or ever envisage that I would have a spinal injury age 20. But it is what it is. And the more that I try to deny reality, the more upset I cause myself. And that grieving process was a big part of what I had to go through. But then it was like, okay, well, what am I going to do with this? And that is the response. And, you know, you jump back and forth between them because we all have to grieve and feel those hard emotions that we all face when we face setbacks or adversities or challenges in our life. And that's really important, not to deny yourself of that. But then it's, well, what do I do with this? And that's the decisive moment where you either ultimately you just survive, or you can give yourself permission to allow yourself to thrive. And you're in control of that. Nobody else is.
Yep, no, that's very true. So also you are a performance and well-being coach and speaker. How is this going so far, and what does it feel like to have had a positive impact on someone's journey of personal development?
Yeah. So it's really interesting. I trained as a pharmacist, and I've always been interested in the health and well-being of people. And so often, as we study in college, and then get out into the real world, we see that sometimes the system is a little bit different than we had envisaged it might be out in the big bad world. And I found that I couldn't deny, first of all, that the healthcare system was mostly a sick care system. And that was upsetting to me to discover. That much of health, the healthcare system was actually managing or solving sickness rather than promoting or enabling health. So that was one thing that I had to kind of step away for a while and look at. But the other thing was that during my time in college, I got exposed to so many things outside of my degree, which is kind of the beauty of college. I think like your academic learning is probably about 30% of the value of going through college. And I got exposed to beginning speaking, and I got really interested in psychology, and I got really interested in social entrepreneurship and started thinking about these different things. And when I pieced all the different things that I was exposed to through college together, it really showed me that I actually cared about helping to make positive change in the world, and empowering people. And I went on to retrain a little bit as a coach, or upskill, I would say, as a coach and facilitator. And I took the experiences that I had as an individual, and the lessons that I learned as an individual, and coupled them with skill sets of coaching, facilitating, and a knowledge of healthcare, and brought all of those together to focus on people's well-being and resilience. And that's been really inspiring for me. It's challenging, I will say, carving your own path. It would, in many ways, be easier for me to fall into the bracket of conventional professional pharmacist role. But I wanted to take a new tilt on that. And I think that's essentially what it is to make a change, is to, or to be a maverick or leader in some way, in the way that you are at the moment through this initiative, is that there's a lot of growing pains and it's uncomfortable at times, and people look on and they see some of the end product and they say, wow, isn't that amazing, and they give you a pat on the back. But they don't realize that it actually involves showing up every day and doing the work, and that none of us get anywhere without a massive amount of that showing up and doing the work. And what's really nice for me is that I get to work with people, both young and old, in from schools to universities and private companies, as well as individuals. And I get to help people do the work every day, but in a way that is empowering for their health, be it on a mental, emotional, physical, or spiritual level. And by spiritual, I really mean values. I mean looking at our mission. I look at these kind of things. And when you start to get some of those things lining up in the right direction, you build resilience from a strong base, and you can weather the storms more strongly from a place of real identity and of an unwavering sense that you have something to give and capacity and so on. And these are the kind of things that build strong, young, and old individuals, and that allow us to make more empowering choices broadly in our lives, in our relationships, in our work, but also in our health and in our well-being and in how we talk to ourselves and all of these kind of things. And ultimately, the relationship that we have with ourselves is the most important relationship we have in the world. You spend 24 hours a day, 24/7 with yourself. And if you can be on good terms with yourself, you're going to be empowering as an individual in your own life, but also for the people that surround you. And so, like for me, it's just a privilege to get to do some of that work with people. And what's cool about it and hard about it is that inevitably it starts by looking at the pain, because everybody has trauma, everybody has pain, everybody has reasons why they do the stuff that doesn't serve them, and so it's often not talked about, but like really it's those struggles, if we leverage them properly, that can ultimately become the biggest teachers, and the things that, if we look at them in an honest way, empower us the most in our lives. So yeah, I enjoy the work I do. It's not always easy, but it's always worthwhile.
It sounds so rewarding and so interesting. So well done with all that. And so also you've achieved so much during and since your time in Trinity. What is next for you, Jack?
So that's really interesting. We almost touched on this earlier, that it's easy for people, I suppose, to look on and say, to look at the CV, I suppose, and say that you've achieved so much. And I found myself a year or two after leaving college very much in a place of I would call it quiet discontent, where I suppose if anybody looked at my CV, they were the ones to give a pat on the back and so on, and aren't you great? But I had to be honest with myself and say, am I going in the right direction here? And who am I doing this for? Is it for myself or for somebody else? And when I started to have some of those conversations with myself, I started to do things for the right reason, rather than anything else. And so that's been an interesting shift for me. And I suppose what's next for me is to continue to develop the work that I'm doing. And I'm going back actually to do a diploma in positive health. So looking at the areas of positive psychology and positive health. And it really is to just further enhance the depth of understanding I have in a lot of the things that I've talked about here, in terms of building health in the population. And I'm also really passionate about creating environments that are more empowering, inclusive, and diverse for individuals. And so I recently joined an organization called Common Purpose that does some of that work. So that's some of the work that I'm doing in terms of empowering organizations to think more broadly about how do we lead across boundaries, and so on. So there are some of the areas that I'm excited about. At the moment, I'm taking a bit of time out to exactly crystallize how do I want to make that impact. I think it's really important every now and then to step back and to look at where you've gone and where you're going. It's like if you're if you're walking a trail, if you don't look up every now and then and have a look around and look at the map, you get lost. So that's some of the work that I'm doing at the moment to really understand where I want to direct that attention and where it'll be most valuable. And yeah, to be honest, for me, it's about showing up daily and doing the work with whoever's in front of me. But that starts with myself, looking in the mirror every morning. So there we are.
Yeah, I say like having some like time of being at home with COVID and all that, it gives you a bit more time to think about things and what's important and what you want to do with life in general. I know that I'm kind of like that myself now. But yes, so like a big thing that like I've been doing during the summer with the other people in Trinity has been the ability co-op. So we've set that up with the other students with disabilities to promote inclusion. By doing this, we've been sharing stories of students with disabilities to raise awareness of issues regarding disabilities. Jack, what advice would you have for students who want to get involved in the co-op or are unsure about drawing attention to their disability?
You know, the only thing, and I think this is an amazing initiative to begin with. You know, there's a certain point as a teenager. Actually, let me step back a little bit. There's this theory called the theory of the one and the many. And every person wants to be accepted as part of the tribe. Okay, so this goes back to when we were living on the savannas as cavemen and women. And if you were outside of the tribe, you might not survive. And that's not really the case anymore. And so we have these two needs. Like within the tribe, everybody had skill sets and everyone contributed something a little bit different. And they wanted to be recognized for that. And so whilst we want to be accepted by the tribe, we also want to be seen as the individual that we are. And your teenage years are really, like for many people, the early teenage years are about being accepted into the tribe. I think college is an amazing opportunity to explore your individuality. And for me, through a variety of different environments in college, whether that be societies or different initiatives that I got involved with, like in the likes of this disability co-op, you give yourself an opportunity to explore your individuality. And what's amazing about that is the people that step out and get seen as the individual, they draw others that are like them. And that's really where you find your own tribe. And if you stay in this circle of the many, you can feel detached from yourself, that these are not my people, and so on. And when you are willing to step out and to be seen, and that's uncomfortable at the beginning, it's those people that step out as the one that are the people that initially lead change, that set up the business, that are the ones that advocate for something. They're the ones that write the music. They're the ones that go and travel, whatever it is, but they step out in some way and become the one. And they in turn draw the many. And so you see this through life, if you look at it, that it's for example, the person that has the crazy business idea that everybody is saying it's not going to work, it's not going to work, it's not going to work, and they persevere. They become the person that starts to get a bit of momentum, and then people start to flock and join, and they become the business leader that employs the many. You see it with the politician who beats the drum of, for example, like the Green Party for so long, were beating the drum and beating the drum and beating the drum, and they were the outliers, talking about sustainability and so on. And eventually they build enough momentum that now people are flocking to them and they are the leaders and so on. And I think the likes of the Disability Co-op has the opportunity for many people to step out, to find their own tribe, and that they then become the disruptors and leaders within not only the college environment, because the college environment percolates outward, and the college environment becomes the graduate environment, and the graduate environment becomes the workplace, and the workplace becomes the leadership, and so on. And you're sowing the seeds for the society that you want. And by you stepping out in that small way and joining a group of other people that are willing to accept others that are that are like and unlike them, you become a group of disruptors in a world that needs to be disrupted more and more, and is being disrupted more and more. And so I just can't encourage it enough. It'll be something that you'll never regret. It's uncomfortable at the beginning, messy in the middle, and beautiful at the end. And go for it.
That's brilliant advice, Jack. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for your time, and thank you, Declan, for being here. Also, we will be back with more interviews from the co-op. Thank you. Bye.